Welcome to Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips, where we talk all things addictions, codependency, relationships, and the good, bad, and ugly in between. Hi, everybody. My name is Jess Phillips. I'm super grateful you're here. I'm a master's level clinician and a relationship and attachment trauma coach. I help freedom-seeking women regain their confidence, master their triggers, and communicate their needs so they can finally put an end to toxic relationships, low self-worth, feeling like an imposter, and become more authentic, trusting, and secure. I know exactly what it feels like to be spinning in circles, stuck in obsession, and living life with all or nothing thinking. After years of failed relationships, impulsive decisions, yo-yo dieting, and riding emotional roller coasters, I knew I needed to get to the root of my issues and that I couldn't go on like this any longer. And that's exactly why I created the 10-week Secure Self-Coaching Program. I was tired of wasting time and money on professionals that didn't understand me. And I knew that trying to fix my own problems with the same thinking that got me there wasn't going to help me get any closer to my goals. If this sounds like you, feel free to send me a message and we'll set up a free consultation call to see if my program is right for you. You can find the link to my website in the show notes. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Welcome everyone to another episode of Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips. Happy to be back on the mic. Took a little break as per usual, had too many things going on at the same time, and I'm just realizing I can't do it all, and I'm no longer going to beat myself up anymore, and I got to finish what I started, and that's what I did. I was behind on so many different things, so I just said, listen, you're either going to drive yourself crazy by trying to do 20 things at 20%, or you can do each one at 100%, and you can finish one thing before you start another. So behind on all kinds of paperwork and treatment plans and notes. So I got those off my desk, feeling a little bit clearer and ready to record some episodes. So today I really want to talk about fear. Fear has been something that has held me back probably my entire life. It wasn't until I entered recovery at the age of 21 that I actually heard the term fear. I didn't really have a name for it, what I was experiencing as a kid. Not wanting to go to school, not wanting to go to birthday parties. And it was like the most confusing feeling in the world because I'm actually quite social and I didn't really have a lot of issues at school. I hated school, but I didn't have any issues or any big lurking things that would make me terrified to go to school. But it was just this paralyzing feeling that I was never able to put a name to until I got sober and I started to hear so many people, first at the treatment center that I was at and then in the rooms of recovery, talk about this idea of paralyzing fear. And everybody was kind of nodding their heads and smiling and saying, yeah, me too, me too. And I was like, okay, what's going on with this fear thing? And I heard the best acronym for it, which is false evidence appearing real. And that is still so true today for me in my life. This idea of I don't really know what could go wrong. I don't really have a lot of evidence that the thing is gonna go wrong or that anything I've really tried in the past has gone wrong. If anything, it's kind of the complete opposite, which is quite frustrating. That when I do try new things, maybe you screw up or mess up a couple of times, whatever it is, but I don't know, this idea of what I think is going to happen in my mind versus the reality of what actually happens are like two completely opposing worlds, which leaves a person quite confused. And it's really annoying. It's just an annoying thing to struggle with. I don't know if any of you guys relate to this idea of fear, but my God. And sometimes I I finally just do the thing or the task or make the call or whatever it is that I'm terrified to do. And I'm like, oh my God, Jess, you're so annoying. Like that wasn't even scary.
That wasn't even scary. Worse, I usually feel like really good after, or I feel proud of myself, or confident, or it's always the action afterwards that makes me feel like, oh, hey, you don't need to be that scared. You could do this. And it really wasn't even that scary in the first place. So, this idea of false evidence appearing real, I'm trying to think back to when I first got sober, and I could understand the fear a little bit more then because honestly, it was like a rebirth. I got sober at 21, and emotionally, I felt like 13 again. This idea of like arrested development, that you're coming to at the same time that you started, at the same age that you started really drinking and using at, and that was around 13 for me. So when I was 21 and I got out of rehab, I felt like everything not felt like everything was brand new. Like I had to have all of these experiences that I probably would have had at an earlier age. So looking back, I could understand having the fear back then, but it just carried with me, and it still can carry with me all the way till today when I've had quite a bit of practice. If I look back, it's like 18 years sober. I've had 18 years of practicing doing certain things, and really you would think that the fear had subsided by now, but like I'm all about being honest with you guys. It really doesn't. It doesn't paralyze me like it used to, because now I actually get a little bit excited because the thing that I'm usually scared of the most, I know on the other side of that is like a lot of joy, a lot of accomplishment, just a lot of good feelings. So now I'm like, okay, I know how to push through. But back then I did not. I remember waking up when I first moved out of my parents' house and got my first condo. I don't remember how old I was. I think I was like 27. So I had moved back home at 21 after rehab, and I was living at home and had all these first experiences and started building a little bit of a life. And I remember when I moved out, and at that point, I can't really remember. I had finished university. I was probably doing some like post university classes. I think I was still like pretty involved in the addiction counseling field. I was waitressing part time. And I remember waking up, and it could be like on a Saturday or a Sunday. I would wake up in my bed, safe, no danger, no reason to have like a fight or flight freeze response activated, no wild animals chasing me in my condo. And I would wake up with the most paralyzing fear you could ever imagine. And I'm very grateful that I don't experience that type of fear anymore. But I just remember at the time, like even something as small as just going to work or going to my waitressing shift, or just seeing friends or going out. I remember the fear would take over so badly. I would start canceling plans a lot. All my friends started to call me ditcher. By the end, I would like organize these like get-togethers at people's houses, and I wouldn't even show up because I was so scared. I really don't know what I was so scared of, but I was like, what if I'm not comfortable there? Or what if I want to go home? Or what if, and now I look back and I'm like, okay, yeah, so what? So what if you want to go home? Take your own car. I'm like the queen of taking my own car because I probably want to bounce way earlier than everyone else anyways. So it's just really interesting to think of this idea of fear, and what is it that causes us so much in like intensity, and this idea of almost being paralyzed to the point where you can't execute. So it's made me think of a couple of things. This idea of, do we have these underlying kind of lurking subconscious ideas surrounding the action that we're about to take? So say, for example, you're experiencing fear of putting yourself out there. I very much know how that feels on social media or making content. Like what is the kind of subconscious idea that's holding you back from doing that? Is it, for example, I'm not ready, I don't know enough? I was the queen of I need to stay in school or further my education because I'm not ready. I don't have enough knowledge yet. And looking back, it's always such a lie, because even the idea of not being ready is a lie, and it is fear. Because I don't know about you guys, but the only thing that has made me more ready for something is practice. And just like being able to look back at the beginning and being like, okay, that wasn't a great video, or that wasn't a great post. I look at some of my stuff from like 5 years ago, and yeah, it's a bit cringy, but that's where I was at the time, and that's where I needed to start. I read an old blog from, God, it must have been like 10 years ago now. And yeah, it's a bit cringe, but that's okay. It's been 10 years of practicing writing, and now I feel like a pretty strong writer. And one of the biggest differences is that I actually enjoy writing now. So it's really about this idea of, okay, I have the fear, I have the old idea, but can I continue to move into action or move into practice regardless? Another big one, for example, is, what are other people gonna think? What if they don't like me? What if I, apply for this job and get rejected? What if I ask somebody out and get rejected? And and all of these subconscious ideas can actually keep us in this place where we just freeze and don't put ourselves out there. And it made me start to think of, okay, do I have any really fundamentally deep subconscious ideas that would match some of the paralyzation that I fear today? And for me, it's always been going on camera, putting myself out there a little bit more. I think when it comes to other stuff like socially, talking to people, communication, telling people how I feel, I don't really feel a lot of fear in that department. But when it comes to, yeah, I think a big one for me was always putting myself on camera and just ripping myself to shreds, and I started to think, okay, here's the big juicy fear for you. So where does that come from? And if I use myself as an example, weight, image, ego, a lot of that stuff was quite prominent in my home. And I don't think my dad had like malicious intent, but he would say pretty wild things like, I'm not eating today, I'm fat. I think he would go on like 2 or 3 day fasts. I don't know. I don't get it. Even though he always exercised and he was always moving and he was never overweight. But I think this weight topic was always quite alive in my home. So when I go on camera today, or when I think that I have to go on camera, I think I have a lot of these old ideas that come up, and it's like, what do you look like? What do you look like? What do you look like? And it's quite daunting, because really I'm the only one who gives a shit what I look like, I think. When I'm scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, especially, the majority of my feed is filled with other psychologists or psychotherapists or coaches, and I'm listening to what they're saying. I really don't care that much what they look like. It's usually the last thing that I'm looking at. So logically and rationally, I can tell myself, you don't need to have this fear. You don't judge people that way. So let's get over it. But it's a big, juicy one. So it is something that, it is something that still plagues me quite a bit. Another big one is wanting to, wanting to try something new, or wanting to build up the courage to talk to somebody, and really asking yourself, okay, if you have a lot of fear around those things, or maybe like applying to a different job or going back to school, I've worked with a lot of clients who have grown up with really like highly critical parents, and parents who have gone as far as saying, you're stupid. You won't amount to anything, which is like totally heartbreaking to say out loud. And I could never imagine saying something like that to a child. But these clients have had this experience. So that would be a big, juicy fear that would stay with them, is this idea of feeling not smart enough, not able to take risks. So I can understand that type of fear would really hold somebody back from trying something new, afraid to look embarrassed or stupid or whatever it is. Putting yourself out there, for example, like if I launch something, or, I have my new ebook coming out on narcissistic abuse, I have the threshold now, and I have thick enough skin that, say, for example, I do launch it and no one signs up. I don't turn that into, you're not enough, or this ebook is silly, or whatever it is. Like, I put in a lot of work in that thing. I think it's good. And I would just view that as, okay, this avenue didn't work. How can I, switch it up and try something different? Because that's not where my fear is. My fear doesn't lie in, people not thinking that I'm smart or capable. I have the confidence, that I don't have the fear in that area. But if you do, for example, I think the best first place to start when it comes down to examining some of our fears is really, why do we have them? Why do we have them? Where do they come from? Because I can almost safely guarantee that these fears are not new fears, unless you've gone through like a traumatic experience. Say, for example, you got in a really bad car accident. That would make a lot of sense. You're going to have fear getting back into a car after that. Let's say you had a really bad bicycle accident and you fell off your bike. You're probably going to have fear associated to riding a bike again. These things are quite normal, and they're a result of trauma. But when we talk about long-standing fears that hold you back from executing as an adult, we really want to think about, okay, where did that old idea come from? So first thing I would suggest is write down what's holding you back. Say you want to make more money, but you feel like you're stuck making the same amount of money each year, or you're getting into debt, or you just can't break through that ceiling. I would do a little fear exercise on what your ideas around money are. A lot of people grew up with a lot of scarcity in the home. So if your parents or your primary caregivers taught you that money is very difficult to make, that once a little bit of money comes in, you might not be getting more, so really hold on to what just came in. You might have developed a fear around money. Now, on the contrary, you might have grown up in a home where spending was excessive, or there was an overvalue put on material things or materialism, and that can kind of skew your idea also of money maybe not being able to save, or not being disciplined with your money. So whatever your fear is, write it down. Write it down. And it's such an interesting exercise because, you might go as far back as elementary school and realize, oh God, like when I worked up the courage to ask him or her out, or when I made a fool of myself at the school dance, or I said something in, one of my classes. I actually remember that I had like an anonymous exercise to do. I think it was a sex ed class. It was like in grade 5 or 6 or something. And I had put my anonymous, like in air quotes, my anonymous question in the hat, and my teacher opened it. I don't even know how she knew it was from me. She read it out to the class, and then she said, "Jessica, you know why this is not possible." And I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed. I said, "What the fuck happened to anonymous?" Anyways, thank God it didn't develop into a huge fear about asking questions in regards to sex ed. But think back to an example of, where your fear first developed. And then ask yourself, how much is that old idea holding you back today? Going back to the traumatic experiences. For example, I still don't get into elevators today. I can if I have to, and it's going to be such a nuisance for me not to, but it has to be a really extreme measure for me to do that. And I remember looking back, there was 2 incidents. One in an elevator where I was stuck with my mom. I don't think it was for very long, but then another one where I was stuck in an underground in London, and that was long. And I don't really remember it happening. So the fear, I don't think, is exactly tied to the experience, but I remember the feeling of being stuck. And being stuck, whether it's physically or emotionally, is one of my deepest fears. So even when I just see an elevator today, or being in the back seat of a 2-door car, just a very tight space where I don't think I can get out, it's a pretty hard no for me. But in terms of more my emotional fears, I really had to do a lot of work where, even the money one for me, for example, there was this idea of, money comes from one person in my family, and that is the go-to person, and all kind of decisions or ideas, or I got a lot of my confidence from this person, and I didn't feel confident enough to make decisions on my own. But this is the whole deal, that paradoxically, when I did start to pull away and make those decisions for myself and fall on my face and try new things, is really where I started to heal my relationship with money and heal my relationship with my confidence and my fears, because it was coming from me. It was no longer coming from another person. So let's start with a couple of your fears. Name them out loud, write them down, write a couple of bullet points on where, if you can remember, they came from. And then ask yourself the evidence question. Okay, what evidence do I have to support this fear? So let's use mine for an example. What evidence do I have that when I record myself, people laugh at me and everybody notices a 10-pound weight gain or 10-pound weight loss? Never. It's never happened. I don't think anybody has ever really, maybe once or twice, and most of them came from family, has anyone ever commented on my weight or made fun of my videos, right? I don't have any supporting evidence for me not to do it. And putting pen to paper and putting things in black and white, it really helps cut the story that I create in my head, because I don't know about any of you guys, but my God, I can go to another dimension with the stories that I create in my head. And I think 90% of them are pretty bogus. So let's look for evidence, write down, and you might have some supporting evidence, right? You might have asked 5 people out in the past year, and 5 out of 5 rejected you. So let's talk about it. Let's put it down. Here's the evidence. Okay, when I ask people out, they say no. It also gives a great opportunity to redirect, right? It would be like me if I launched a new product and there was crickets. My first thought would be, okay, what's behind door B? What else haven't I tried? Are you asking the wrong people out? Are you still attracted to people that, don't vibe with who you are today? What are your methods? And then we get to see, okay, what's working and what's not working. And one really difficult question that I really try to ask myself, but it's hard if I'm stuck in the fear, But it's really, I remember my old business coach used to say this to me, and he used to say, um, you know, who would you be, or what would you be doing if the fear didn't exist? Who would you be being? And I ask myself that pretty often today, like if I'm procrastinating on something or these episodes or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. Who would I be if I was recording consistently? How would I feel if I was recording consistently? Because also too, and I don't know about any of you guys, but the procrastination is actually more painful and more destabilizing than actually just doing it. There has been times where I have thought about something for like 3 weeks, and then I finally just do it and I'm like, oh my God, I want my 3 weeks back. I really fucking spiraled for no reason. It was like way easier if I just moved into action. So, who would you be being if you were doing these things consistently, if the fear wasn't present? And lastly, action. Action is my solution to almost everything, especially if you're like me and you are an overthinker. Acting your way into something is way easier than thinking your way into something. I don't even know if it's possible to think my way into. I think myself into a tailspin. That's the only place I think myself into. It's really like, I don't want to think about the workout that I have to do. I don't want to think about the notes that I have to do. I really just have to say, can you just do 10 minutes? That's how I started a couple of weeks ago with this huge pile of files that I had that I knew was going to take me. And it did. It took me like 2 weeks to finish it. But I just knew you have to start one at a time. Like, you just have to start. Because if I just stay in this place of non-starting, then I'm always just going to get what I'm used to getting. So it's really this idea of action. And it doesn't have to be a large action. It doesn't have to be, because that was another cycle that I would stay stuck in for quite a while, was this idea of, I'm only going to launch when I'm so ready and so organized and so all of these things. I'm only going to start the podcast when X, Y, and Z. And it's like, give it a break. Give it a break. I'm never going to be at this place of fantasy readiness that I think I'm going to ever attain, because I just don't believe that life works that way. I often talk to clients about this kind of imaginary checklist that we all have, and this delusion that once we knock everything off the checklist, like we're gonna, I don't know, float into this like heavenly place of euphoria where we have nothing left to do. And it's like, I don't know, maybe for an hour or two, but then if you're anything like me, the next morning I just build a new checklist. So I came to a large place of acceptance that the list is always going to be there. I do a lot of prioritizing the list. So what is the thing I've been putting off the longest? Because that's a scary thing too, right? I'm the type of person where if some people, they just go to work, and even the tasks that they don't really like, they do anyways. I'm the type of person, and thank God I work for myself, otherwise I'd be fired. If I don't like something, I'm not doing it. And I'm almost like a child. I'll stomp my feet and I'll have a little temper tantrum. If it's not hitting my dopamine receptors, if it's not fun, if it's not creative, if it's not super windy and challenging, I'm like, ugh, I'm so bored. I'm so not into it. But, life is life, Jess, and, I'm going to have to do things that I'm not always going to love. So I have to be careful with that. And I made that big mistake over the past 6 months. There was a task that I was putting off for a very long time. And at first it started just like I was behind on 1 or 2 or 3. And then I was behind on 35. And then the pile got so daunting that I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And I would just think about it. And I would wake up and I would be like, nope, today's not the day. I'm going to do something else, or I don't feel enough energy to do it, or I'm in a bad mood, or I'm X, Y, and Z, whatever it was. And I would just keep putting it off until it just becomes so painful. And I'm just like, I can't live this way anymore. So anyways, it took me 2 weeks to finish everything. I feel quite proud of myself that I did that. And it was also a lesson learned. I don't know about any of you guys, but sometimes I have to put my hand on that very hot stove and get burned again to learn a lesson, which is unfortunate for me, but it is what it is. But I'm going to try to not do that anymore going forward. And I've already seen a change in my discipline in terms of finishing some of the not so fun tasks at the end of my workday, even though my brain is like completely fried. It's also been like a very new experience for me to have this full of a client base, which I'm eternally grateful for. But I've never actually worked with so many people. So at the end of the day, like 5 or 6 p.m., I literally feel like a zombie. It's a very strange feeling. I don't feel like I have anything left to give or write about or talk about. So the idea of like doing notes or catching up on paperwork seems pretty tough, but I've been kind of chopping it up during the day, doing a little bit here, a little bit there, so that I don't feel, this overwhelm, or I'm not staring at this pile of files on my desk come Saturday when I'm trying to relax a little bit. So long story short, if you're putting something off, try to do a little bit at a time. I remember watching a YouTube video and she suggested to get an oven timer and put the oven timer on your desk and just set it. So set it for 10 minutes, set it for 15 minutes, whatever you feel like you can do. Turn your phone around, turn your phone off, eliminate all distractions, and just get started. Just get started. That's the only way, I believe, to get through the fear. Because what happens too with a little bit of momentum, if you do 10 minutes 4 days in a row, who knows, by the 5th day, maybe you'll be like, oh, I'm going to crush 20 minutes today or 30 minutes today or whatever it is. And then you're going to start to get some confidence back, right? Once I start practicing, it's like anything. It's like a sport. It's like video games, whatever you guys are into, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Speaking of getting good at things, I am going to get really good at doing shorter podcasts. So it's been 30 minutes. I'm going to shut the bleep up now because I want to put out more content, more podcasts, but I can't afford to do hour-long podcasts every single time. So that is my little mini rendition on fear. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you can relate to anything that I was talking about. And again, just to summarize, think of the fear, write the fear down. Ask yourself, do I have any evidence to support the fear? Write down where the fear originated if you can remember. Who would you be being, or what would you be doing if you didn't have the fear? And then move into action. Let me know how it goes. Love you all. See you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks everyone for listening and supporting Living Out Loud. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.